Welcome to another episode of the Preparedness Podcast, the podcast where we try to bring you the best in preparedness information. My name is Rob Hannes, and today I am going to be presenting to you an interview with Paul Munson, who is the president of Sun Oven. I wanted to bring Paul on because as somebody who knows his product really well, he can describe all the features of it and stuff. And when I first thought of the Sun Oven and went to look at it, I just thought it was an oven that goes in the sun, but actually it has a lot of features that solve a lot of issues for us preppers. One of them being cooking without fuel, even in the winter, which, when I thought of the Sun Oven, I thought, well, it had to be at least a summer day or something. That turns out it's not the case. So if you're like me, who really hasn't given the Sun Oven much thought, I think you're going to really like this interview because it's really, really informative about how to use the Sun Oven and how you can put it in your preps and actually, solve a crucial part of being prepared. Before we get to that, though, I want to cover some housekeeping and some announcements. First thing I want to cover is, surprisingly, there are 2 Prepper Expos in Arizona next month, October 2012. I don't know how we got so lucky to have both of them. But if you're in the Arizona area, especially the Valley area here, or you're going to be passing through or want to make the trip, you can find out more about these if you go to the website, thepreparednesspodcast.com, and in the search bar, if you search for Prepper Expo, that'll be the fastest way for you to find the post. And in there, I've got links to both of their websites on the information. They're both in October. One's at the beginning, one's at the end of the month. So if you're interested, go ahead and check it out. My wife and I are going to be there, so if you're going to be around and want to come by and say hi, that'd be great. When I say come by, I don't mean like we're going to have a table, but we're going to be in white T-shirts with the Prepper Podcast logo. Just, feel free to stop us and say hi because we'd like to meet you. This is still September. It's about the middle of September, and it's still the National Preparedness Month, so it's a great time to make this the month that you go through your preps and check everything. I know it's kind of busy with school starting and stuff if you have kids or if you're still in school yourself, but just like changing the batteries in your smoke detectors, you need to check your preps on a regular basis, and what a better month to do it than September. If you've got your own checklist, go ahead and run through it. If you are looking for ideas of things that you should do during this month, I've got a blog post on it entitled National Preparedness Month Checklist. Again, if you go to the website and search, I put it out on September 1st of this year, or if you just search for National Preparedness Month Checklist, you'll find it, and it's got a great list of things that you can do to go through and check your preps. Another thing that happened about 5 days ago, on the 13th, is that the Federal Reserve announced QE3, or Quantitative Easing 3, to infinity. I covered this in a post on September 13th. You can search for it by searching for QE3, but in there it's a real quick summary of what they did and what we can expect. And in there, I actually forecasted that we're going to see a further reduction of this country's credit rating. And sure enough, that has already happened for at least one credit agency. And I think we can expect to see that happen across the other ones as well. This is a big move. This is not something to take lightly, and I actually think this could very well be the beginning of the end, so to speak, for the economy. I'm putting together a big hyperinflation podcast that's coming up either later this week or definitely by next week. I'm still putting the notes together. It's pretty complicated, and I want to make sure that I can explain how it works and why and what we can expect and stuff like that. Now, before we get to the interview with Paul, I just want to quickly mention flyingeaglegold.com. I think now more than ever, you really need to consider how you're going to preserve the wealth of your savings. When we cover the hyperinflation in the upcoming podcast, I'm going to explain how inflation chews away your wealth, how the value of your dollars. It may still look like $10,000, but it really isn't. It doesn't buy the same amount that it used to. Folks, this is the reality of what we're looking at. If we see hyperinflation in this country, if we even see massive inflation in this country, the dollar is going to go to zero or near zero. It doesn't matter because it'll be worthless. There are recent examples in the world in the past 10, 20, 30 years of massive inflation and hyperinflation. So it's not a stretch to think that it can happen here. When the dollar collapses, you're going to need some way to be able to trade with other people. Sure, you can do barter, and that works initially. But the reason we have money is because barter is inefficient. You know, gold and silver are the original currency. That's one of the reasons that we're suggesting is because it's a currency. Get some if you have extra money. You know, take care of your preps, but you can preserve what you have. You can maintain the value and keep your buying power by having gold and silver. So give Jeff a call or go to his website, flyingeaglegold.com. Okay, before we get to the interview with Paul and Sun Oven, I just want to mention how to contact me. You can email me at rob@prepcast.info, and you can follow us on Twitter at Prepcast, or check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/preparednesspodcast. And let's get right to the interview. Paul, thank you for coming on to the podcast. I really appreciate it. Folks, Paul Munson is the president of Sun Oven, and I wanted to have him on I thought it would be best, for somebody who really knows the product to come out and explain and tell us all the cool things that it can do. Because as I had mentioned before, this is one of those items that kind of took me by surprise when I first thought about it. Living here in Phoenix, I wasn't really all that thrilled about cooking with the sun. I think because it's so hot here. I mean, I could throw eggs on the sidewalk or probably put a pan out there and cook. So I didn't really give it a whole lot of thought. And then recently I was at a prep meeting with some preppers down here in the Phoenix area, and one of the things they went over is they were showing different ways to cook with the sun, and the Sun Oven was one of them. And it was clear that this model, the Sun Oven itself, was better made than the other couple models they have, and clearly better than the improvised methods they were using. And I got to see some of the stuff it did. I'm like, okay, well, you know what? That's actually pretty interesting. And then I heard Paul talk about the Sun Oven on another podcast, and I was like, wow, this is really one of those solutions to how do I set up cooking for my preps. Now, we all know that if you want to cook, you need fuel. You need propane, or you need wood, or you need charcoal, or something like that, and you need a steady supply of fuel. So when I started thinking more about this, I realized that wow, this is a really cool product that I think does solve the issue of how do I cook in a crisis or an emergency, and not have to worry about constantly having new fuel and stuff. And I just think it's one of those products that hits all these points. And so I wanted to have Paul on. So Paul, I really appreciate you coming on and talking with us.
No, it's my favorite subject. Appreciate any opportunity to talk about cooking with the sun.
So can you tell us a little bit how Sun Oven came to be?
Well, I've been making the Sun Ovens the last 14 years, but I took over making them from the inventor. And a gentleman by the name of Tom Burns had owned a chain of restaurants in the sun capital of the world, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And he had retired from the restaurant business, was very familiar with the idea of cooking because he'd been doing it his entire life. And also he was very active in Rotary International and had done a lot of international travel and seen the need in divorced and developing countries around the world for an alternative method to cook. So he put his interest in working internationally together with his experience in cooking, and spent a number of years and a great deal of money in developing the Sun Ovens and developing what most people think is the most widely used solar oven in the world. And I had met Tom in 1997. I was a marketing consultant, and one of my clients had asked me if I could help him because he had put everything he had into developing the sun ovens, over $2 million, and the bank that had lent him money to do it was trying to force him to liquidate his home to pay off debts and different things. And so a mutual friend of Tom Burns and myself asked me to help him see if I could start marketing the sun ovens. So I started working with him on marketing them, and at that point he was approaching 80 and really just wanted to slow down. So in April of 1998, I put together enough money through investors to pay off his bank loans and move the making of the ovens from Wisconsin. We make them now just outside of Chicago in Elburn, Illinois. And so we marketed and got into it originally with the idea that, and which is still a major part of the work we do, is getting them into developing countries where there's a huge need for a way to cook where after the trees are gone in so many different places. But as people in the U.S. started getting more and more concerned about emergency preparedness, it's kind of evolved now into actually having a bigger market in the United States than what we do in the other countries where we make and market sun ovens.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. So it's a USA-made product that started primarily as being sent over to some third world countries so they could cook without actually having to use up the fuel supply in the forest. And now with the preparedness movement, now how many models has this gone through?
Well, actually, in the early days, Tom started making them in 1986, and between 1986 and 1993, he probably went through 5 or 6 models. Since 1993, there's been almost no changes to the sun oven at all. There's some minor improvements that we've made to it, but it just works so well, and it's so basic, and it gets about 100 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than any other type of solar cooker. So we haven't really done much to tamper with the success of the sun oven that we've had, just tried to make them a little more efficiently, but the basic model hasn't changed now since 1993. Mm-hmm. We also, which we don't really promote in the United States, but we do make a very large commercial solar oven that's called a villager sun oven, and we have those in about 55 countries around the world, primarily in schools and hospitals and orphanages. And a villager sun oven can make 1,200 meals a day just with the sun, or 28 loaves of bread an hour. And we have those in a number of different locations. And frankly, we subsidize the making of the villager sun ovens with the sun ovens that we sell in the United States, primarily to people who are concerned about emergency preparedness.
Wow, that's amazing. That's actually kind of cool that you can take the sun again without any extra fuel and cook for an entire village. I love that. The reason I bring up how long and how many models and stuff is because one of the things I look for in a product is if it's a new product, they probably have a lot of bugs to it, and if it's a product that's been around for a while and maintains its popularity as far as people still buy it and it still works and stuff, it typically means that, they've figured out all the bugs that need to be squashed and they've got it working really well. And like I said, when I saw these different demonstrations on different sun ovens and different ways you can cook with the sun, that was one of the things I found impressive. It was really easy to see that, they really have this down pat. So, all right. So if I'm going to have a sun oven, I'm going to cook in it. What can I cook in it? I mean, what are the limitations to what kind of meals I can make with it?
Well, with a sun oven, you can bake and you can boil and you can steam foods. So the only limitation is something that's fried. But other than fried foods, there's pretty much nothing you can't make in the sun oven. I mean, you can make something as simple as a pot of rice, on up to that you can make up to an 18-pound turkey in it. So pretty much anything that you can bake or boil or steam can be cooked in the sun oven, and it's a phenomenal way to rehydrate, like freeze-dried or dehydrated foods. But a lot of people don't take into consideration when they have their food storage with freeze-dried or dehydrated foods is that many of them require you to boil water and then pour the boiling water over the whatever the product is, whether it's freeze-dried or dehydrated, and stir it till you get the right consistency and then serve it. Well, if you're going to use something like, say, butane, just to boil a pot of water to feed a family of 6 to 8 people, you'll use a third to a half a canister of butane. So if you're storing fuel, a lot of people store food for a year, but it's very difficult to store fuel for a year. So a sun oven is phenomenal for being able to rehydrate the food storage that people have, as well as it's great for baking bread. And so if people have wheat that they're stored and want to bake bread, again, baking bread is something that's very energy intense. And if you were in a situation where energy wasn't available, the fuel storage you had would be used up real quick with baking bread and rehydrating food. So with a sun oven, if you can use it in the Phoenix Valley, you can probably use it almost 80% of the days. You can still have some part of a day that you can cook in the sun. In different places where I am in Illinois, we can still use it probably 65% of the days. So that means the amount of fuel that you have to store is considerably less. And that's a real advantage of being able to harness the power of the sun.
Right. That was one of the things that impressed me was that I think I've seen this where people don't actually project out far enough. They don't actually calculate how much fuel they're going to need or how much water when they're looking at their preps. And so that's what I really liked about this is that you can stretch the fuel supply that you have, or you can go ahead and make sure that, well, I'm out of fuel so that when I do have the ability to cook with the sun, boom, it's there. And you don't have to worry about scrounging for wood scraps or something to burn or something like that. Now, you had mentioned making bread. Now, I've made bread the past couple winters just to make sure I knew how to do it, and actually because it tastes really good. Now, can you have the dough rise with the sun oven and then heat it up so it cooks? Or how do you preheat the sun oven so that you're ready to go?
Well, as far as preheating the sun oven, if you put a sun oven in the sun and you just stand behind it and you get the shadows that the oven casts even on both sides, in good sun, a sun oven will get up over 300 degrees in less than 20 minutes. So it doesn't take long to preheat a sun oven. You can rise bread in the sun oven. Most people just raise the bread on, outside of the oven. The only things you do a little different if you're going to do bread in the sun oven as opposed to doing it in the conventional home oven is when you raise the bread, instead of letting it raise over the top of the bread pan like you would in a conventional oven, when you do it for the sun oven, you raise the bread till it's about a half to 3/4 of an inch below the top of the bread pan. And the reason for that is, let's say I preheated a sun oven to 300 degrees. When I open the door, sun oven is a completely even heat, so nothing burns in the sun oven because when you've got food inside of it, the food inside the pan itself, and the air around it are exactly the same temperature. So the pan is never hotter than the food, so the food doesn't burn. But with that even heat, if I preheated it to 300 and then I put the bread in, because the bread is starting at the ambient temperature, the temperature inside the sun oven is going to drop 50 to 75 degrees, and then it's going to raise. If you've already raised the bread to its full height before you put it in, when that temperature drops and raises, the bread has a good chance of continuing to raise and then falling. But if you take the bread and you put it in the sun oven and you've raised it till it's about a half to 3/4 of an inch below the top of the bread pan, then as the temperature drops and raises again, the bread raises to the right height and it's fine. And the other thing you do a little different when you bake bread in the sun oven is if you take a spray bottle and you just spray a light mist of water on the bread dough, then the bread will brown even at regardless of what the temperature is inside the sun oven. And the amazing thing about the sun oven is because it's non-drying, I've baked bread. Normally, I can bake a loaf of bread in 45 minutes, or 2 loaves take an hour, hour and 10 minutes. But I've baked bread on days when it's partly cloudy, and I've only been able to get the sun up and up to about 250 degrees, and I've baked bread at 250 degrees, and it just takes longer, but it doesn't dry out. It takes 2.5 to 3 hours to bake it at that lower temperature, but it doesn't dry. In a regular oven, if you tried to bake bread at 250 for almost 3 hours, it'd be so dry, it'd be as hard as a rock, but in the sun oven, it doesn't dry at all.
Now, that's what one of those points that I was listening to when you had spoken before that really kind of caught my attention, because I'm like, well, wait a minute, how does this happen? But apparently you've got like a gasket, and you seal down the glass windows so that it's basically sealed, so the moisture that's in there stays in there. It's not being leaked out to the air. Is that right? Exactly.
It's an airtight seal that traps the air inside the oven's chamber, and so the moisture stays in there. Even, for example, if you're going to make things like rice, you use a third less water in it. By the way, anything other than bread or bakery goods that you make in the sun oven, you do make in a pot with a lid on it, and the lid keeps the moisture inside the pot, but then you use 1/3 less water in the pot because you don't have the evaporation that you would have if you were cooking on a stovetop or over an open fire.
And that's, again, something that I thought was really amazing, is because you're able to cook at these wide variety of temperatures, from 250 to 350, and not have to really worry about it's kind of cooking. I've cooked in a pit before, where I don't know if you've done this, but you go camping, you dig a pit, and you kind of throw some coals in there, and then you stick like a Dutch oven, and then you bury and stuff. And what always got me about that was like, well, how do I know it's done? And they're like, doesn't matter. Anything over 4 hours, you're good. Like, well, how do I know I'm not going to burn it, or how do I know that it's not overcooking? And they're like, don't worry about it, it's good. And that's what I liked about this, is that it wasn't something that you had to sit there and constantly monitor to make sure that it didn't burn or didn't overcook. Like you're grilling meat, if you got it right on the fire there, you can miss it by 2 minutes, and next thing you know, you've got charred meat. So that's one of the things I really liked about this.
Well, one of the things that's amazing is there's 2 ways to cook in a sun oven. And let's say I was going to make a 3-pound chicken. If I put a 3-pound chicken in a pot, if I refocus the oven, if I move it every 30 minutes to follow the sun, I can cook a 3-pound chicken in as little as an hour and a half. Or I could take a frozen chicken, put it in the sun oven in the morning, set it facing south, which is where the sun will be in the middle of the day, leave for the day, and come back at dinner and have a cooked roast. So I can cook the same chicken in as long as 8 or 9 hours, or as little as an hour and a half, just by the amount of time that I refocus it, which is somewhat important to emergency preparedness, because there's times where, from a lifestyle standpoint, it's great to just put a meal in and let it slow cook and not worry about it, and nothing's going to burn and nothing's going to dry out. But if you're in a preparedness situation and you wanted to use your sun oven for cooking, and you're going to use it possibly for water purification, or we're going to use it just for plain hot water, and a variety of different things, the fact that you can refocus it every 30 minutes and your cooking time is pretty much the same as a stovetop or your regular oven. We just say that for every time you open the door of the oven, you should add 15 minutes to it. It gives you a lot of options where if you need to do a lot with it, you can. And if you don't need to do a lot with it, you can just let it cook all day.
Exactly. And that's what I liked about it, is because it allows me the flexibility to do what I need to do. I mean, we use the crock pot here a lot because it slow cooks, and you don't have to mess with it. You set it, and it cooks for several hours, and it's great, and you can go about your day doing other things and attend to other things. And I think that's important in preparedness, because one of the tasks you'd have to do in a crisis or an emergency is gather water and cook food and stuff like that. And anything that makes it easier is going to be something that you're going to want to have. Now, the sun oven is absolutely in my budget. I can't wait to get one, because one of the other things that you can do with it is pasteurized water, which I think is important, in addition to, say, making hot water with it. So, I don't know how many gallons of water could you put in there to warm up or pasteurize?
Well, I mean, you could probably pasteurize up to 8 or 9 quarts at a time in the sun oven. And the one benefit of pasteurizing over boiling is that pasteurizing is 2 or 3 times faster than boiling. At most altitudes, water boils at 212 degrees. But what most people don't realize is that it takes as much energy to bring water from 200 degrees to 212. The last 12 degrees takes as much energy as it does to bring it from the ambient temperature up to 200. When you pasteurize water, you bring it to a temperature above 159 degrees Fahrenheit for 6 minutes, and that kills all the germs and bacteria in the water. And there's little devices that we make available with the sun oven that are called WAPIs, or water pasteurization indicators, and they're just a simple plastic tube that has wax in it. When the wax melts and goes to the bottom of the tube, then you know that the water is safe to drink. And with a WAPI, you just take it out of the hot water, the wax rehardens in less than 2 minutes, and then you could reuse it hundreds of times. I've done projects in Haiti where we've taught people to use a WAPI and gone back 3 years later, and they're still using the same WAPI every day. So, I mean, it will last a long time. And mentioned the idea of hot water. What most people don't take into consideration is most people will look at water purification and have some system to do that. But when it comes to hot water, in our daily living, if we actually look at the breakdown of our energy uses, the typical family uses more energy every day to heat water than they do to cook. And so the number of things we need hot water for, like doing dishes or of course, we take showers, but if you're in a preparedness situation, you need hot water for personal hygiene, like taking a sponge bath. And so the sun oven can heat water, and oftentimes people will cook a meal and put 2 quart-sized canning jars next to the pot and heat the water to do the dishes while they're cooking their meal. So again, if you had to use a backup fuel like butane or propane to do that, it would use a lot of fuel, where when you can use the sun, it can meet the needs of both hot water as well as pasteurizing water. And many people who get a sun oven with the idea that they're going to use it to pasteurize their water will take a piece of cheesecloth and keep it with their preparedness supplies. And if you take the water and you pour it through a piece of cheesecloth, that won't take any solid impurities out of it, and then you can pasteurize it to kill the germs in it, and you've got safe water, again, just using the power of the sun.
And that's what I liked about the sun oven. Now, there's a way to purify the water called SODIS, which is basically solar disinfection. It uses the UV and stuff. And I think that's an okay method that can be used. But when you're actually pasteurizing it and you have this little indicator, I've seen this indicator because this, again, was part of the demonstration that I went to. It's really simple. It's very low tech, but it's accurate. Just like you said, when the wax melts, you know that you hit that temperature and the water is ready to use. Now, when I think of my preps and I think of what kind of emergencies I might have to go through, I've kind of resigned myself to just washing up, even if it's just a sponge bath with tepid water or whatever temperature the ambient air is, whatever the water is. But you know what? With the sun oven here, I like the idea of being able to have warm water. Now, it's not like taking a shower, but man, it'd be a lot better than having to use cold river water or something. So,
and think about doing your dishes. You really would be uncomfortable doing dishes in cold water for any prolonged period of time. So, being able to do the dishes with warm water can really be a great sanitation benefit and health benefit as well.
Exactly. You can't discount the sanitation area. Now, I know when we go camping, after we cook dinner and stuff, the pans usually go right back on the fire with some water in there, and that's okay when you have a lot of wood for cooking. You can use that wood efficiently and stuff. But again, to be able to cook something and then, like you said, you put some water next to it, and this is going to be the cleanup water. I think was great. Now, you had mentioned refocusing the sun oven. Is this something like my 12-year-old son can do? Is it that easy, or do I have to?
Oh, absolutely. You'd find your 12-year-old son would have no problem with it. Probably any child, probably over the age of 6 or 7, would be able to refocus it. It's just a matter of standing behind the sun oven and looking at where the shadows the sun oven casts on the ground or the table you're cooking on, and having them even on both sides of the oven. So it's not a very complicated thing. And then what you do with the sun oven is, if you want to cook quickly, as I mentioned, you just move it every 30 minutes. But if you aren't going to cook quickly, you sort of just decide, let's say it's 1 in the afternoon, you want to eat at 5, you can put your meal in and then just set the sun oven where the sun's going to be around 3 o'clock. You always leave a sun oven ahead of the sun, so you set it where the sun's going to be around 3 o'clock, and then you come back at 5 o'clock and your meal will be cooked. But if you're an hour late because nothing burns or nothing dries out, it really wouldn't make any difference at all.
Right. So what about the external temperatures? Do I have to worry about them getting burned? Because, you said it gets up to 400 degrees, right?
Yes. It's very, very safe around children. The sun oven will get up to 400 degrees, but when you touch the reflectors on the outside of the sun oven, or you touch the box, there's absolutely no heat. There is a glass door, and the only part of the sun oven that actually gets hot that's exposed, to the outside, is the glass door. If it's 350 degrees inside the sun oven, the glass door, the outside of the glass, if you touch it, it's going to be about 150 degrees Fahrenheit, which will sting if you touch it, but you're not going to really burn yourself at that temperature. And so it's very, very safe around children. And we always say there's one advantage of the glass door getting hot, and that is that it will keep your neighbor's dog from eating your pot roast. I mean, any animal that's out in the daytime will sense the heat and stay away from the sun oven. There are a lot of animals that are out at night that don't sense the heat and wouldn't stay away from the oven, but most people don't allow solo cooking at night, so you don't have to worry too much about that. So it is actually animal resistant in that it's hot, just like your dog won't, try to get the food out of your oven when it's hot. They won't try to get the food out of the sun oven, but it's extremely safe around children. There's no way anybody can get burned, and the reflectors on the sun oven never get hot at all, so children can walk up and touch it. Now, inside the sun oven, it gets up to 400 degrees, and when the temperature, there is a built-in thermometer to the sun oven, and when you look at it, if it says that the temperature is 400 degrees, inside you have to have oven mitts or hot pads, because it is 400 degrees just like your regular home oven, but outside there's no heat whatsoever.
That's really cool. I like that aspect of it. So what about winter use? If it's like 40, 50 degrees or something, I'm cooking outside, so how does that affect the use of the sun oven?
Actually, it doesn't affect it at all. Ice fishermen in Minnesota will put them on a frozen lake and use them. Or on our website, we have pictures of the sun ovens used at the base camp of Mount Everest, where it never gets above 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So the use of a sun oven is contingent on the direct sunlight. So as long as it's sunny and you have a cold, sunny day, you can set the sun oven on a frozen lake or in a snowdrift, and it works just fine. The sun oven is very well insulated to hold the heat in, which is why you can touch it on the outside and you don't feel any heat. But it also, that insulation keeps cold air out. And so I live in Chicago, and it's not uncommon for on a winter day for me to go out to my car when it's 0 but sunny and get inside the car and the steering wheel is almost too hot to touch. That's the greenhouse effect, which is pretty much the principle of how a sun oven works. And so the outside temperature has no effect. The only difference between winter cooking and summer cooking is that in June you can use a sun oven 12 and a half hours a day. In December you can only use it about 5 hours a day because the days are so much shorter. So we oftentimes, when people look at winter cooking the sun oven, recommend they don't try to slow cook in it, particularly in climates. Wouldn't make much difference in Phoenix, but it would make a big difference in Illinois, where the weather can change so quickly. If it's a sunny time, we recommend it's refocused pretty regularly so that you can get your food cooked just in case the weather changes, which it more prone to do in the wintertime.
Right. Well, actually, we've had a lot of interesting weather here. I think we've had more cloudy days than sunny days in the past couple of weeks. How does it? You mentioned earlier that you cooked something with when it was cloudy. So I assume that it still works, but maybe not quite as efficiently when it's cloudy. I mean, obviously,
right. The rule of thumb in using it is pretty simple. There has to be enough sun to cast a shadow. So if you go outside and you can't see your shadow, you can't cook in the sun oven. If there is enough sun to cast a shadow, then you can use the sun oven. It is going to take longer to cook because it's not going to be as hot, but it will still cook fine on a day when it's partly cloudy. But if it does get overcast to the point where you can't see a shadow, then it's not a good day to cook in the sun oven. So it's pretty easy to determine what days you can or what time of day you can or can't cook in it just by going outside and seeing if you can see your shadow or not.
Yeah, that's a pretty easy indicator, so that makes it easy to know. Now, the other thing I thought was interesting, and I didn't know about this before I had heard you speak about it, but it can dehydrate food as well, right?
Yes.
How does that work if it's if it's sealing the moisture in? I guess I don't really understand how that works.
Well, the sun oven has two latches that latch the glass door shut for cooking, and that forms an airtight seal. It has a glass door that opens and closes, and basically if you turn one of those latches into the oven and you set the glass on top of it, that leaves a gap of air that's about a half an inch, which allows the moist air to escape out of the sun oven and keeps it from getting too hot.
Okay.
And one of the optional items that's available with the sun oven is a set of dehydrating racks that you can put right in the sun oven, and then you can do multiple levels of things that you want to dry. If you want to make jerky, or you want to make sun-dried tomatoes, or anything from your garden you want to dry, you can use the sun oven as a dryer or dehydrator. And we just started promoting that, or came out with these racks within the last year, because as we talked to people about emergency preparedness, we found a lot of people had gardens that they were growing things in, but if you were in a situation when your garden is ready to be harvested and a situation where there's no power, then it's nice to know that you can use the sun as a backup way of drying or dehydrating as well as cooking. And the racks, by the way, are wonderful you can use the same racks if you want to make multiple layers of cookies or flatbreads or quiches or different things. So it allows you to cook multiple layers at the same time. And by the way, I do want to mention that with the even heat in the sun oven, you can stack pots on top of each other. So anything, because it's an even heat in the chamber, anything that will fit in the chamber you can cook with, you can be cooking in. So it does give you a wide variety of different options as far as cooking more than one thing at the same time.
That's going to be an interesting getting used to this. I was telling my wife, I said, yeah, you can use it in the winter. I mean, and she's like, well, how does that work? Because it's so cold. And I say, well, it's the sun. And I was like, well, it's probably, 40 degrees or higher. But you said it was a lot lower than that. So I'll have to go back and I'll have to tell her, because that was one of the things that she didn't understand or believe, quite honestly, because it's such an interesting concept of being able to, even if it's in the middle of the winter, as long as you got the sun, you can cook. You can pasteurize the water. I love how it can dehydrate, because to me that's one of the preppers' tasks that we have to kind of do. If you're into your own garden or you want to make your own food storage, dehydrating is something that we need to do. Now, when we were talking before, Paul, you had mentioned a contest.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things we find that many people who get sun ovens for preparedness never take them out of the box and use them. And we've done surveys, and we found that probably close to 70% of the people who buy sun ovens treat them like other preparedness supplies, put it on a shelf somewhere and hope you never have to use it. And the sun oven, unlike so many other preparedness items, is something that will easily pay for itself, because if you do your baking outside in the summer, you don't have to pay anywhere near as much for air conditioning. And we want people to be better prepared. So for National Preparedness Month in September, what we're doing is we're running a contest that encourages people to use their sun ovens, and then they can register each time they cook in the sun oven. They get additional entries if they invite people over and have a sun cooking party, or if they send in recipes or photographs or videos, or if they're into social media, they can like us on Facebook and get entries. And there's a whole variety of different ways people can earn points to win prizes. And all the details of that are on our website at sunoven.com/contest. And it explains the whole thing. But the idea is that we really want to get people to get their sun ovens out of the box and let them see the light of day. So what we're trying to do, if people start using their oven now, they're going to be so much better prepared in an emergency. But once people start cooking in it, quite frankly, they get hooked, because we talked about making like roasts or making chicken, that the taste of meat cooked in the sun oven is so moist and so succulent, and the bread is so much lighter and fluffier when it's cooked in the sun. So consequently, as people start to use their sun ovens, they find a lot more reasons why they like to continue to use them, and it actually saves a lot of money. I know one gentleman actually in the Phoenix Valley had told me that he had bought his sun oven. He kept track of how much he saved by using it, and he figured he paid for it in a little less than 9 months. And then he continued to keep track of how much he saved and the money he saved by not primarily on air conditioning costs, by doing the cooking outside, a little bit with cooking fuel savings. He then took and put his savings from utilities into funding the rest of his food storage and emergency preparedness. So as people's budgets are stretched, it is something that if you use it can help you improve your preparedness supplies, because it's pretty tough for a lot of people to be able to set aside food storage and still meet their daily obligations of feeding their family, and the sun oven can actually contribute to that.
I think that's a really awesome contest, because being National Preparedness Month, I wrote an article on the website that basically says, hey, use this month to go over your preps and to check and make sure everything is working well, go through your bags. But you know what? I'm a big proponent of testing your preps. If you have a flashlight or a lantern, or if you think you're ready for a grid down situation where the power goes out, or however you're going to cook your food, however you're going to purify your water, you need to test it. And I think likewise, cooking with a sun oven is definitely going to be something that people need to do, because it is slightly different than cooking normally, especially in probably getting used to the difference in moisture that you need to add to the foods. But you know what? That practice makes perfect, and I think September makes a perfect month to do that, to go out and test and make sure you know how to do it. Well, Paul, I really want to thank you for coming on the podcast. I think the listeners got a really good idea and a lot of information about the sun oven, and hopefully we've answered all their questions. Is there anything else I do
want to mention that we do have a link from your website with a banner ad that does offer a pretty significant discount on a sun oven, that they can just go to your website and click on the sun oven box, and that will bring them to a coupon page that would offer them a significant discount on getting a sun oven.
And we appreciate that. And folks, if you want to take advantage of that, which I highly recommend you do, you can go to thepreparednesspodcast.com, and you'll see the banner on the right-hand side. Click on it, and you'll be taken to the coupon page for the sun ovens. Paul, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. Enjoy the rest of Preparedness Month.
You too. Thank you. So there you have it. I hope you learned more about the sun oven and how it can provide a solution for your cooking needs in your preps. Until next time, folks, enjoy life and be safe.